March 2021. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the construction site along the Willamette River in Portland, Oregon. Construction foreman Dale Mitchell's excavator had just broken through what workers assumed was an old storm drain when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. "Stop everything. Call the police." His voice carried across the site, silencing the machinery that had been rumbling all morning. What began as a routine demolition project for a new apartment complex had just unearthed something that would finally answer questions that had haunted Portland for nearly 4 decades. Buried beneath 3 feet of concrete in what was once the basement of an abandoned warehouse, skeletal remains, fragments of distinctive leather jacket, and a corroded class ring bearing the initials JC and the year 1983. For 38 years, the disappearance of 19-year-old Jennifer Catherine Chen had been nothing but unanswered questions. A college freshman who vanished one rainy February night after a shift at the campus bookstore. An empty dorm room with her textbooks still open on the desk. Parents who aged decades and days, never knowing if their daughter had run away, been taken, or met some terrible fate. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Your support helps ensure these forgotten victims get the attention they deserve, and it helps the algorithm show this content to others who care about justice. The discovery along the Willamette wasn't just the end of a missing person case. It was the beginning of an investigation that would expose a web of corruption, reveal a serial predator who had hidden in plain sight, and demonstrate how advances in forensic technology can finally give voice to victims long silenced. This case represents more than just solving a mystery. It's a testament to a family who refused to stop searching, to detectives who kept the case alive through budget cuts and changing administrations, and to the power of DNA technology that finally connected dots investigators couldn't see in 1983. This is also a story about institutional failure. When Jennifer first disappeared, crucial hours were lost because campus security dismissed her roommate's concerns. Evidence was mishandled. Witnesses were never properly interviewed. The investigation suffered from assumptions about young women who go missing, assumptions that would haunt the case for decades. What makes this case particularly chilling is how close investigators came to the truth multiple times over the years, only to have leads go cold or be dismissed. The killer attended Jennifer's candlelight vigil, spoke with her parents, even volunteered to help with search parties, all while knowing exactly what had happened to her. Part 2, Jennifer's story. To understand the magnitude of what was lost that February night in 1983, we need to know who Jennifer Chen was, not just as a victim, but as a young woman full of promise and potential. Jennifer was born in San Francisco in 1964 to David and Margaret Chen, first-generation immigrants who had built a successful restaurant business in the city's Chinatown district. She was their only child, and from an early age, she displayed an insatiable curiosity about the world around her. Her childhood friends remember her as fearless, the girl who would climb the highest tree, who volunteered to read her essays aloud in class, who stood up to bullies even when they were twice her size. Jennifer never backed down from anything, her best friend Sarah Martinez would later recall. She had this inner strength that you don't see in many people, let alone a kid. Jennifer excelled academically, particularly in literature and creative writing. Her high school English teacher, Mrs. Patricia Holloway, kept every essay Jennifer wrote. She had a gift. Holloway said in a 2021 interview after the remains were discovered, not just with words, but with seeing the human condition. She wrote with empathy and insight that students twice her age couldn't achieve. During her senior year at Lincoln High School, Jennifer won a statewide essay competition with a piece titled The Invisible Ones, a searing examination of homelessness in San Francisco that she researched by volunteering at a local shelter for 3 months. The essay caught the attention of several university admissions officers. She received acceptance letters from 6 universities, but chose Portland State University for its strong creative writing program and the opportunity to experience life outside the bubble of her San Francisco upbringing. "I want to see how other people live," she told her parents. "I want to write stories that matter, and I can't do that if I only know one place." David and Margaret Chen were both proud and terrified. They had worked their entire lives to give their daughter opportunities they never had, but the thought of her moving hours away, living on her own at just 18 years old, filled them with anxiety. Margaret, especially, worried about letting her daughter go. "I had this feeling," Margaret would tell investigators years later, her voice breaking. Call it mother's intuition. "I couldn't shake this sense that something bad was going to happen. But Jennifer was so excited, so full of dreams. How could I hold her back because of feeling?" Jennifer arrived at Portland State in September 1982, moving into Hoffman Hall, a co-ed dormitory on the south end of campus. Her roommate was a business major named Lisa Thornton from Eugene, and the two hit it off immediately despite having completely different personalities. Where Jennifer was outgoing and adventurous, Lisa was reserved and cautious. But their differences complemented each other. "Jenny was the one who pushed me to try new things," Lisa recalled decades later. "She dragged me to poetry readings, convinced me to join the campus newspaper, introduced me to people I never would have talked to on my own. She made me braver." Jennifer threw herself into college life with characteristic enthusiasm. She joined the campus literary magazine, took a work-study position at the university bookstore, and signed up for every writing workshop available. Her freshman composition professor, Dr. Robert Klein, later said she was one of the most talented young writers he'd encountered in his 30-year career. But Jennifer wasn't just focused on academics. She was deeply engaged with the world around her. She volunteered at a women's shelter in downtown Portland, worked with a group advocating for tenants' rights, and wrote op-eds for the student newspaper about everything from campus safety to Central American refugees. She cared. Her editor at the student paper remembered, not in a performative way, not to look good. She genuinely cared about people who were suffering or being treated unfairly, and she wasn't afraid to call out power structures, even when it made people uncomfortable. This fearlessness, this unwillingness to look away from injustice, may have ultimately led to her death. In the weeks before she disappeared, Jennifer had been working on an investigative piece for the student newspaper about allegations of sexual harassment and assault by a professor in the psychology department. She had interviewed multiple students who claimed the professor had used his position to coerce them into sexual relationships, threatening their grades and academic futures if they refused or spoke out. Jennifer's notes, found in her dorm room after she vanished, included the names of 6 potential sources. She had interviewed 4 of them. The 5th interview was scheduled for February 24th, 1983, 2 days after she disappeared. The professor she was investigating, Dr. Marcus Aldridge, was a tenured faculty member with powerful connections to the university administration. When Jennifer's story angle became known, she received pushback from her editor, who suddenly seemed reluctant to pursue the piece. "We need to be absolutely certain," he told her. "We can't print something like this unless we have ironclad proof." Jennifer was frustrated but undeterred. "Then I'll get the proof," she told Lisa the night before she disappeared. Part 3. The Night She Vanished. February 22nd, 1983. A Tuesday. The weather forecast called for rain, typical for Portland in late winter. Jennifer had a full day ahead. Morning classes, a study group session in the afternoon, and her evening shift at the campus bookstore from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Lisa Thornton saw Jennifer that morning around 7:30 a.m. They had breakfast together at the cafeteria. Pancakes and coffee for Jennifer, yogurt and granola for Lisa. Jennifer was in good spirits, excited about a poetry reading schedule for that weekend featuring Allen Ginsberg. She was completely normal, Lisa would tell police later. Happy, energetic, making jokes. There was nothing that seemed off or worried about her at all. Jennifer's morning classes proceeded without incident. Her American literature professor noted she participated actively in the discussion of Walt Whitman's Song of Myself. Her journalism instructor praised a draft she submitted for a feature article about Portland's underground music scene. At 2 p.m., Jennifer attended her study group in the library. 3 other students from her Western Civilization class preparing for a midterm exam. They studied until 4:30 p.m. Then Jennifer left to grab dinner before her bookstore shift. This is where the timeline becomes crucial and, in retrospect, heartbreaking. Jennifer stopped at a campus food cart and ordered a falafel wrap. The vendor, a graduate student named Ahmed Hassan, remembered her clearly. "She was one of my regulars," he recalled. "Always friendly, always asked about my classes." That night, she seemed a little distracted, but nothing alarming, as Jennifer ate her dinner. Sitting on a bench near the student union, a campus security guard named Thomas Whalen passed by. They exchanged brief pleasantries. He asked about her classes. She asked about his evening. This interaction was logged in Whalen's shift report at 5:42 p.m. This would be the last confirmed sighting of Jennifer Catherine Chen alive by someone who didn't have a reason to lie. Jennifer arrived at the campus bookstore at 5:55 p.m., 5 minutes before her shift began. The bookstore manager, Diane Perry, noted that Jennifer seemed her usual self. She immediately began restocking the new arrival section, her assigned task for the evening. The bookstore was relatively quiet that Tuesday night. The pre-midterm rush had passed, and the rain that had started around 7 p.m. kept many students away. Jennifer worked alongside two other students, Marcus Rodriguez, a sophomore, and Helen Chong, a junior. Both would later tell police that Jennifer seemed normal throughout the shift. They chatted about classes, complained about the weather, and discussed weekend plans. Jennifer mentioned the Ginsberg reading and tried to convince them to attend. Around 9 p.m., Jennifer took her break. She grabbed her backpack from the employee room and told her co-workers she was going to make a quick phone call. The bookstore had a payphone near the entrance, and several people remember seeing Jennifer using it, her back to the store, speaking in tones too low to overhear. This phone call would become one of the central mysteries of the investigation. Who was Jennifer calling? What was discussed? The university's phone records from that night were incomplete, a fact that would raise questions about possible tampering years later. Jennifer returned from her break around 9:15 p.m. and continued working until the store closed at 10 p.m. She helped with the closing procedures, counting the register, straightening shelves, taking out trash to the dumpster behind the building. Diane Perry locked the front door at exactly 10:03 p.m., something she noted in her closing report. Marcus and Helen left immediately, heading back to their respective dorms. Jennifer told Diane she needed to stop by the library to return a book before it closed at 11 p.m. "Be careful," Diane remembered saying. "It's really coming down out there." Jennifer smiled. "It's Portland. If I worry about rain, I'd never go anywhere." Those may have been the last words Jennifer Chen ever spoke to someone who cared about her well-being. Diane watched Jennifer pull up the hood of her distinctive leather jacket, a vintage bomber jacket with an embroidered phoenix on the back that she'd found at a thrift store downtown, and step out into the rain. Jennifer turned left, heading in the direction of the library, and disappeared into the darkness beyond the streetlights. Diane locked the bookstore's back door and went home. Jennifer never made it to the library. She never made it back to her dorm room. She simply vanished into the rainy Portland night, leaving behind only questions that would haunt investigators for 38 years. Part 4. The first 48 hours. In any missing person case, the first 48 hours are critical. Every minute that passes reduces the chances of finding the person alive. Unfortunately, in Jennifer Chen's case, those crucial first hours were squandered by a series of institutional failures and assumptions that would plague the investigation for decades. Lisa Thornton didn't realize Jennifer was missing until the next morning. When she woke up around 7 a.m. on Wednesday, February 23rd, she noticed Jennifer's bed hadn't been slept in. This wasn't entirely unusual. Jennifer occasionally stayed up all night writing or studying in the library, but something felt wrong. Lisa felt her stomach tighten with worry. She checked with neighbors in the dorm. Had anyone seen Jennifer? No one had. She called the bookstore. Had Jennifer maybe pulled an unexpected overnight shift? The manager, Diane Perry, confirmed Jennifer had left at 10 p.m. as usual. At 8:30 a.m., Lisa went to campus security to report her roommate missing. This is where the first critical failure occurred. The campus security officer who took Lisa's report was a man named Gerald Foster. By multiple accounts from students and staff, Foster was known for being dismissive of student concerns, particularly those from young women. His nickname among students was Officer Ignore It. When Lisa explained that her roommate hadn't come home and seemed to have disappeared, Foster's response was devastating. "She's probably with a boyfriend. College girls do this all the time. She'll turn up." Lisa insisted something was wrong. Jennifer would have called, would have let someone know. This wasn't like her. Foster was unmoved. "Tell you what," he said, "if she's not back by tonight, come file another report. But I guarantee she'll show up with some story about losing track of time." Precious hours were lost. Lisa, feeling helpless but not willing to give up, started calling people herself. Jennifer's friends, classmates, professors. No one had seen her since the night before. She called the library. No one remembered seeing Jennifer there. She called the hospital. No Jane does matching Jennifer's description. By noon, Lisa's worry had transformed into panic. She called Jennifer's parents in San Francisco. Margaret Chen answered the phone. The moment Lisa explained that Jennifer hadn't come home, that campus security wasn't taking it seriously, Margaret felt her worst fears crystallizing into reality. "We're coming," Margaret told Lisa. "Don't let them dismiss this. My daughter is not the kind of girl who just doesn't come home." David and Margaret Chen dropped everything. David left the restaurant in his manager's hands. They threw clothes into a bag, got in their car, and started the 10-hour drive to Portland. Margaret tried calling Jennifer's dorm room every hour, hoping to hear her daughter's voice, hoping this was all a misunderstanding. The phone rang and rang, unanswered. Meanwhile, Lisa returned to campus security that afternoon with several of Jennifer's friends, demanding more action. A different officer was on duty, Sergeant Patricia Morrison, who had a daughter in college herself. Morrison took the concern more seriously. "You're right," Morrison told him after reviewing Foster's dismissive report. "This doesn't sound right. Let me make some calls." Morrison contacted the Portland Police Bureau at 2:15 p.m. on February 23rd, approximately 16 hours after Jennifer was last seen. A missing person report was officially filed. Detective Frank Walsh was assigned to the case. Walsh immediately recognized what his campus security counterpart had missed. This was not a typical runaway situation. A 19-year-old college student with no history of disappearing, with personal items left in her dorm room, with worried friends and family. This was concerning. Walsh began interviewing witnesses that afternoon. He spoke with Lisa Thornton, who provided detailed information about Jennifer's habits, personality, and schedule. He spoke with Diane Perry and the other bookstore employees, establishing Jennifer's timeline. He spoke with the library staff. No one had seen Jennifer that night. Walsh had campus security pull any incident reports from the previous night. Nothing unusual had been reported. He requested the campus police patrol logs. The report showed routine checks. Nothing suspicious. But one thing stood out. There was a gap in Thomas Whalen's patrol log between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. Whalen had noted his location at 9:55 p.m. and again at 11:02 p.m., but the hour in between, the hour when Jennifer would have been walking from the bookstore to the library, was blank. When Walsh questioned Whalen about this gap, the security guard seemed nervous. "I was doing my rounds," he said. "Must have just forgotten to log in. Sometimes you get busy and forget to write things down." Walsh noted this inconsistency, but didn't push it. Not yet. By the time David and Margaret Chen arrived in Portland at 8 p.m. that evening, a full-scale search was underway. Campus security, Portland police, and dozens of student volunteers were combing the campus and surrounding areas, calling Jennifer's name, checking buildings, searching the wooded areas along the campus perimeter. The rain had finally stopped, leaving everything wet and cold and muddy. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness as searchers looked in bushes, behind buildings, in drainage ditches. Anywhere a person might have fallen or been hidden. They found nothing. Margaret Chen couldn't stay in the hotel room the police had suggested. She needed to do something, anything, against Detective Walsh's advice. She joined the search party, showing Jennifer's picture to everyone she encountered, calling her daughter's name until her voice was hoarse. David Chen stayed at the campus police station, making calls, organizing, trying to keep himself busy so he didn't fall apart. He contacted the media, local TV stations, newspapers, radio. He needed everyone to know his daughter was missing. He needed everyone to be looking for her. By midnight, exhausted searchers returned to the campus police station. They had covered miles of ground and found no trace of Jennifer. Detective Walsh gathered everyone for a briefing. "We're going to expand the search tomorrow," he announced. "We'll bring in search and rescue teams with dogs. We'll search beyond campus boundaries. We'll check homeless camps, abandoned buildings, anywhere she might be. Walsh turned to David and Margaret Chen. I want you to know we're doing everything we can. We're treating this as a potential abduction. We're not assuming she ran away. We're going to find your daughter. Margaret Chen looked at this detective with red-rimmed eyes. Promise me, she said. Promise me you won't stop looking. Walsh made a promise that night that would haunt him for decades. I promise we won't stop until we find her. Part 5. The investigation deepens. The next 72 hours saw an intensive investigation that should have broken the case open. Should have, but didn't, due to a combination of bad luck, limited technology, and what would later be revealed as active interference by someone with a vested interest in keeping Jennifer's disappearance unsolved. On February 24th, search and rescue teams arrived with cadaver dogs. The dogs searched the campus systematically, covering buildings, grounds, and surrounding forested areas. At one point, one of the dogs showed interest in an area near the psychology building, but nothing was found. Detective Walsh assembled a timeline of Jennifer's last known day, interviewing everyone who had contact with her. He learned about the investigative piece she was writing, about Dr. Marcus Aldridge, about the potential sources she was planning to interview. This opened a troubling line of inquiry. Walsh requested Jennifer's notes and files from her dorm room. What he found concerned him deeply. Detailed allegations of sexual misconduct by a tenured professor, notes indicating Jennifer had received pushback on the story, names of students too afraid to go on record. When Walsh attempted to interview Dr. Aldridge on February 25th, he was blocked by the university's legal counsel. Dr. Aldridge is cooperating fully, the attorney said, but any interviews must go through us first. We need to protect faculty rights and the university's reputation. This bureaucratic roadblock delayed the interview by 2 crucial days. When Walsh finally sat down with Aldridge on February 27th, the professor had plenty of time to prepare his responses with legal guidance. Aldridge expressed appropriate concern about Jennifer's disappearance, but denied any connection to him or his conduct. I barely knew the girl, he claimed. She was never in any of my classes. If she was asking questions about me, it was based on malicious gossip, nothing more. When Walsh pressed about the specific allegations, Aldridge's attorney shut down the interview, without evidence of crime, without even evidence that Aldridge had contact with Jennifer the night she disappeared. Walsh couldn't pursue this line further, but he noted it in his case file. Something felt off about Aldridge, about the university's protective stance, about the whole situation. Meanwhile, the search expanded into Portland's neighborhoods. Jennifer's photo appeared on the evening news, in newspapers, on telephone poles throughout the city. Tips started coming in. Someone saw a girl matching her description at a bus stop. Someone else saw her at a downtown restaurant. Another caller claimed to have seen her getting into a car. Every tip was investigated. Every single one led nowhere. The most promising lead came on February 26 when a clerk at a convenience store 3 miles from campus called police. She was certain Jennifer had been in the store around 11 p.m. on February 22nd, the night she disappeared. The young woman had bought cigarettes and seemed nervous, looking over her shoulder repeatedly. Walsh rushed to interview the clerk. He showed her multiple photos, including several that weren't Jennifer, testing her certainty. The clerk picked Jennifer's photo every time. That's her. I'm sure of it. But there was a problem. Jennifer didn't smoke. Her friends and family all confirmed this. Lisa had never seen a cigarette in their room. Jennifer had written articles for the student paper about the dangers of smoking. Walsh pressed the clerk. Was she absolutely certain? The clerk hesitated, then admitted the girl she'd seen had been wearing a jacket similar to Jennifer's, had similar long dark hair, but now that she thought about it, maybe she wasn't completely sure. Another dead end. As days became weeks, the investigation began to slow. Fresh leads stopped coming in. The searchers had covered every inch of campus and the surrounding areas multiple times. The story stopped being front-page news, relegated to smaller updates in the inside pages. David and Margaret Chen refused to leave Portland. They stayed in a hotel near campus, spending their days making copies of Jennifer's photo, hanging flyers, talking to anyone who would listen. Margaret walked the route from the bookstore to the library dozens of times, try to understand where her daughter could have gone. Detective Walsh kept working the case, but he was also being assigned new investigations. The Portland Police Bureau, like all police departments, had limited resources. A missing person case with no body, no witnesses, no evidence of foul play. It wasn't getting priority. On March 15th, 3 weeks after Jennifer's disappearance, Walsh received a call that initially seemed promising. A hiker had found women's clothing in Forest Park, several miles from campus. The clothing included a leather jacket. Walsh's heart raced as he drove to the location. Could this finally be the break they needed? The jacket was similar to Jennifer's, vintage bomber style, worn leather, but it didn't have the embroidered phoenix on the back. It wasn't Jennifer's jacket. The disappointment was crushing. That same day, Walsh decided to interview someone who'd been on his list but kept getting postponed. Thomas Wayland, the campus security guard who had that unexplained gap in his patrol log the night Jennifer disappeared. Wayland agreed to meet with Walsh at the campus security office. He seemed nervous, his hand shaking slightly as he poured himself coffee. When Walsh asked again about the gap in his log, Wayland's story changed. "Look," he said, his voice low, "I didn't want to get in trouble, so I didn't mention this before. But I wasn't doing my rounds during that time. I was with someone, a student. We were seeing each other, and she met me behind the maintenance building. I couldn't put that in my log." Walsh's instincts tingled. Who was the student? "I can't say. She could get in trouble. I could lose my job." "A girl is missing," Walsh said, his voice hard. "Your discomfort with workplace policy is not my concern. Who were you with?" Reluctantly, Wayland provided a name, Melissa Rodriguez, a sophomore. Walsh interviewed her that evening. She confirmed Wayland's story, clearly embarrassed but adamant they had been together from approximately 10:15 p.m. to 10:50 p.m. Another dead end. But also another crucial time window lost, because someone was more concerned about personal consequences than a missing girl. By April, the case had gone cold. Walsh had exhausted every lead, interviewed over 100 people, and searched everywhere he could think to search. The Chen family returned to San Francisco, devastated but unable to stay away from their business and livelihood indefinitely. Before they left, Margaret Chen sat down with Detective Walsh one final time. "You promised me," she said. "You promised you wouldn't stop looking." "I won't," Walsh assured her. "This case stays open. We won't forget Jennifer." But in practical terms, there was nowhere else to look. Jennifer Catherine Chen had vanished without a trace. Part 6. The Cold Case Years. The years that followed Jennifer's disappearance were marked by frustration, dead ends, and periodic revivals of interest that ultimately led nowhere. It's during these decades that the true impact of the case on those involved, particularly Jennifer's family, becomes heartbreakingly clear. Detective Frank Walsh didn't give up. Even as the case officially transitioned to cold case status, even as he was assigned to fresh investigations, Jennifer's disappearance haunted him. He kept her file on his desk, reviewing it during slow periods, hoping to see something he'd missed. Every few months, he'd get a call. Someone claiming to have seen Jennifer. Someone reporting a body found that might match her description. Someone with a tip about what happened that night. Walsh investigated every single one, no matter how far-fetched. In 1985, a body was found in the Columbia River. Young female, approximately the right age. Walsh drove to the scene, his heart in his throat, simultaneously hoping for closure and dreading confirmation. The body was identified as someone else, a runaway from Seattle. In 1987, a woman called the tip line claiming her ex-boyfriend had confessed to killing a college student in Portland in the early 80s. Walsh interviewed the ex-boyfriend, who denied everything and had an alibi that checked out. In 1989, a psychic contacted the police claiming to have visions of where Jennifer was buried. Against his better judgment, Walsh followed up. They excavated the location the psychic described. They found nothing. Each false lead, each empty grave, each wrong body, it all took a toll on David and Margaret Chen. The Chen family's ordeal is perhaps the most tragic element of this story. Unable to grieve properly without knowing Jennifer's fate, unable to move forward without answers, they existed in a painful limbo for decades. Margaret developed severe depression and anxiety. She couldn't enter Jennifer's childhood bedroom for years, keeping everything exactly as Jennifer had left it before moving to college. Every February, as the anniversary of the disappearance approached, Margaret would become almost non-functional, barely able to leave her house. David threw himself into work, using the restaurant as an escape from the unbearable reality of not knowing what happened to his daughter. But colleagues noticed a change in him. The light had gone out of his eyes. The easy smile he'd always had was gone. They organized annual memorial events for Jennifer, hoping to keep her case in the public eye. They appeared on local news programs every year on the anniversary. They contacted journalists, private investigators, anyone who might help find answers. In 1992, they hired a private investigator named Carol Reynolds, paying her with money they'd been saving for Jennifer's future, for a wedding for graduate school, for whatever Jennifer would have needed. Reynolds worked the case for 2 years, re-interviewing witnesses, exploring theories Walsh had already exhausted. She found nothing new. The financial strain was immense. The emotional strain was worse. People would tell us to move on, to find closure, Margaret said in a 1998 interview with a Portland newspaper. But how do you find closure when your daughter is just gone? How do you move on when you don't know if she's alive somewhere, needing you? When you don't know if she's suffered? When you don't know if she's calling for you, and you can't hear her? Meanwhile, back in Portland, the case file grew dusty. Detective Walsh retired in 1994, but before he did, he made sure the case was transferred to a detective he trusted, Sandra Martinez, who had a reputation for never giving up on cold cases. Martinez reviewed everything Walsh had done and came to a troubling conclusion. There were significant gaps in the original investigation, not due to Walsh's incompetence, but due to interference and institutional obstacles he'd faced. The most significant gap involved Dr. Marcus Aldridge, the professor Jennifer had been investigating. Martinez discovered that multiple students had filed complaints against Aldridge in the years following Jennifer's disappearance, complaints that were quietly settled by the university without any formal investigation. In 1996, Martinez formally requested to interview Aldridge again. He refused, citing health reasons. She attempted to get a warrant to compel his testimony, but the district attorney's office declined. Without evidence that Aldridge was directly connected to Jennifer's disappearance, they couldn't justify forcing a dying man, Aldridge had been diagnosed with cancer, to answer questions about a 13-year-old cold case. Aldridge died in 1997, taking whatever he knew to the grave. Martinez also discovered something that Walsh had never known. The university phone records from the night Jennifer disappeared hadn't just been incomplete. They'd been deliberately purged. Someone with administrative access had deleted records from multiple campus phones, including the payphone where Jennifer had made her last call. This revelation suggested something more sinister than a random abduction or accident. Someone had actively covered up evidence. But who and why? Martinez expanded her investigation to look at everyone who had access to those phone records. The list included campus security supervisors, IT staff, and certain administrators. Without knowing what was deleted, she couldn't prove any wrongdoing. The case stalled again. In 2003, advances in DNA technology gave cold cases new hope. Martinez submitted every piece of physical evidence from Jennifer's dorm room and the areas she'd been that last night for DNA analysis. Some items contained DNA, hair strands, skin cells, but without a suspect to compare them to, it was just data. The FBI's combined DNA index system, CODIS, had been established, allowing law enforcement to compare DNA from crime scenes against a database of known offenders. Martinez uploaded Jennifer's case evidence. No matches. Another disappointment. The Chen family continued their vigil. In 2008, they created a website dedicated to Jennifer's case, posting photos, timeline details, and a plea for information. They received hundreds of messages, some from genuinely concerned people, some from conspiracy theorists, some from cruel individuals claiming to know what happened to Jennifer, but never providing verifiable information. Margaret Chen read every single message, no matter how painful, hoping one might contain the truth. By 2010, David's health was failing. The decades of stress, the endless grief, had taken a physical toll. He suffered a stroke that left him partially paralyzed. As he lay in his hospital bed, recovering but never fully regaining his strength, he told Margaret something he'd been holding inside for years. "I feel like I failed her," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I was supposed to protect her. I was her father. And I let her go to Portland, and someone took her from us, and I couldn't save her." Margaret held his hand. "You didn't fail her. She loved you. She knew you loved her. This isn't your fault." But in her own heart, Margaret carried similar guilt. That mother's intuition she'd felt, that sense that something bad would happen. She'd ignored it, and her daughter had paid the price. In 2015, Detective Sandra Martinez retired. Before leaving, she did something unprecedented. She organized a meeting with David and Margaret Chen, showing them the entire case file, holding nothing back. She wanted them to know everything that had been done, everything that had been tried. "I'm sorry I couldn't solve this," Martinez told them. "I'm sorry I couldn't bring Jennifer home to you." Margaret Chen, now in her 70s, looked at this detective who had dedicated 15 years to her daughter's case. "You didn't give up on her. That matters. Someone remembered her. Someone cared." The case was transferred to Detective Robert Emerson, a younger investigator in the cold case unit. Emerson approached the case fresh, using new forensic techniques and database searches that hadn't existed when Jennifer first disappeared. He re-examined the DNA evidence using improved analysis methods. He researched genetic genealogy, the breakthrough technique that had recently solved the Golden State Killer case. Could similar methods work for Jennifer? The problem was that the DNA evidence they had was limited and degraded after 35-plus years of storage. But Emerson didn't give up. In 2019, he sent samples to a specialized lab that used cutting-edge DNA sequencing technology. They were able to extract more complete DNA profiles than previous tests had achieved. Emerson uploaded these profiles to GeneMatch, a genetic genealogy database used by people researching their family trees. He was looking for familial matches, distant relatives of whoever had left DNA in Jennifer's dorm room or on her belongings. For months, there were no useful matches. Then, in February 2020, a hit came back, a partial match to someone who had uploaded their DNA results from a commercial ancestry test. This was the first real break in the case in nearly 4 decades. Part 7, The Breakthrough. Detective Robert Emerson stared at his computer screen, his heart pounding. The genetic genealogy match was distant, approximately a third cousin to the unknown DNA donor. But it was something. After 37 years, it was finally something. Genetic genealogy had become a revolutionary tool in solving cold cases. By comparing crime scene DNA to commercial genealogy databases, investigators could identify potential suspects by finding their relatives and building family trees backward to identify possible donors. The process is painstaking and complex. Emerson worked with genetic genealogist named Dr. Hannah Klein, who specialized in building family trees from DNA matches. Klein took the GeneMatch results and began constructing a family tree, using public records, census data, obituaries, and other genealogical resources. "We're looking for men who would have been adults in 1983, Klein explained to Emerson, who had some connection to Portland or the university, who fit the age profile. This could take weeks or months. It took 3.